Hi, I'm Josh Freeman. I'm the founding partner of Freeman Lovell. We are a business and real estate law firm and help entrepreneurs to navigate the pitfalls and legal landmines that pop up along the path of a business from idea to exit. We've created this kind of educational series to help our clients and other people understand these legal principles. And today we're going to be talking about when you're deciding how you should own your interest in your business, how to decide whether you should own it yourself as an individual or whether you should own it in like a trust or a LLC or other kind of holding company. And so there's different nuances and different pros and cons and different things to consider. So we'll start with individuals and trusts. So the main issue that determines whether you should own whether you can own your interest within as an individual or a trust safely for asset protection purposes is if you control the majority of the company. You've owned the majority of the company and control kind of the day-to-day operations, the bank accounts, how things are run that way. Because the biggest risk for you on an asset protection side is if you don't manage the business properly, you don't purchase adequate insurance, you start spending money out of the company bank account for personal things and you're not reimbursing it and doing the proper formalities to cover those things. You can have your protection, your liability protection, stripped away by the courts. They can claim that you're using it as an alter ego, or they can do what's called piercing the corporate veil. And so this is something we don't want to have happen. And so if you own the company and you control the company, own the majority of the company and control it and run it, you can be in a position where you know that you are following the proper formalities and the proper guidelines in order to keep that liability protection in place. So if you're doing that, then it's okay to own your interest as an individual or a trust. It's really nice because there's less administration, fewer tax filings, it's, more, it's less complicated. The caveat for that is like irrevocable trusts who have to file their own tax returns and things that way. Depending on the type, but in general, it's cheaper, easier that way. The downside is it doesn't have additional liability protection, but because you have your LLC or a corporation and you're running it right, you probably won't need it, so it's doable. It's not as easy to transfer small amounts of your equity without approval of the company because most companies have documents that restrict those types of transfers that way, whereas if you're an entity, you can sometimes make small transfers at your entity level that don't trigger some of the rights of first refusal and other things like that in your entity documents. So there's some transfer issues, as well as there's some loss of anonymity for individuals, as you have to disclose some of that information depending on where you register or when you have to send information to banks or other people that way. So on the individual side, that's kind of what you're looking at. On the entity side, so say you're a minority owner in a business, that you're investing in a business or you don't control it, you don't control how the management runs things, and maybe you're a little skeptical about how they're doing it. I mean, it's very common. We've seen that with WeWork recently, where it was run in a very crazy fashion, and so you may be a little concerned about how things are being run. In that circumstance, then it is wise to own your interest in your company through a holding company, through a separate LLC, maybe a separate corporation, but usually an LLC. And so if you're in that situation, you can do that. And the advantages for that are, number one, it gives you that added layer of protection. It also helps, it can provide more anonymity, less people knowing exactly who owns what, that way, without having to do further digging and and things that way. There's also possibilities, depending on how active you are versus passive and other things that way, where you may be able to have some additional tax savings on those funds and some other deductions and things that way. So that can potentially be another pro of having a holding company own your equity in a company. And it also frees up that ability sometimes to transfer small amounts of equity at your ownership entity level, rather than at the main company level, which could avoid some rights of first refusal or other potential co-sale rights or other things that way. So there's some pros that way. The downside is you have to set up another business, depending on how many owners and other things like that. There might be additional tax filing costs. You'll have to set up bank accounts, do those kinds of things. If it's a single member LLC, taxes disregarded entity, it can be pretty painless as far as the administration goes. You'll have to set up a separate bank account, but the tax return filings are going to be just what you were doing as an individual anyway. And so there's ways to make it better and easier. But the biggest question, if you're concerned about protecting your personal assets, then it's worth looking into having a holding company to own your interests in these operating entities. And then the other secondary question is how much you control it and how much trust you have that the business is being run right, and that you won't run into problems of having the company lose its liability protection through not following the proper formalities and other requirements. So that's kind of what you're looking at there. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and hopefully it's been helpful. If you have any questions or want to talk more about this, you can reach out to me at this email here, josh@freemanlevel.com. You can contact any of the other business attorneys, and we can help you make sure that you get your entity structured right and your asset protection aspects handled properly. Thank you for your time, and good luck.